Ahlebait TV. I'm your host, Fahima Mohammed, and we're here tonight with another episode with Sincere Community Services, SCS, a platform where we're learning the truth about Islam. And I just want to remind the viewers that this is a live call-in show. If you have any questions or queries, please do call in. It would be lovely to hear your voices tonight. We have our guests for today, which I would love to introduce. Assalamu alaikum. We have Sheikh Ayub. How are you?
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Fine, alhamdulillah. And how are you today, Sister Fahima?
Very well, and really, really excited that you're joining us again today. So, an absolute pleasure. We also have with us, all the way from Virginia in the USA, we have Robert. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing? Assalamu alaikum, everybody.
Very well, very, very well. It's so nice for you to join us here tonight. I know it's probably 5 hours behind in your sort of time. I do appreciate you taking time off work for us today. It's really, 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 refreshing to hear people come on the show from across the globe and give them, all their insights that we are learning every day, especially even as existing Muslims. It's so important to have this kind of dialogue so we can have more sort of like access to information on what's happening, not just from across the globe, from people from different walks of life. And this is what it's all about. So before I come to you, Sheikh, I just want to quickly find out from Robert. Tell me a little bit about yourself and your journey to Islam.
Hey, assalamu alaikum, everybody. I've been Muslim almost 7 years, not quite, but it's approaching. My journey, it wasn't overnight. It was quite a long journey. I can't say there was one specific moment or one specific instance that led me. I think it was the totality of multiple circumstances. So I grew up in a small town in Kentucky. There was nobody but Christians there. So it was difficult to learn about anything outside of Christianity. But I knew that wasn't where my heart was. I tried very much to get into it, like love it and feel at home with it, but it just didn't feel like it had all the answers that I like desiring or needed to know. And everyone I knew was like Christian, but they didn't really follow it to a certain point. So I started to look at Islam, but without any guidance from like sheikhs or other Muslims. It was a slow process. So then I moved out of Kentucky, moved around a little bit, ended up in Texas. And I'm like, okay, there's a bigger population here. So I went to a halal grocery store. I walked in, I found someone. I'm like, hey, how you doing, brother? Where's like the nearest mosque or masjid? So he drew out the directions. I drove to the masjid. It was right after prayer because all the Muslims were leaving, and I found somebody. I was like, hey, how you doing? Where's like the sheikh? And he just sort of looked at me, and I'm like the imam, the person leading everything. He's like, oh, right this way. I'm like, all right, cool. So he took me in. I saw the sheikh. I was like, hey, how you doing? I want to learn more about Islam. So he took me to the office, and we started talking. Even then, at that moment, I was still going to the masjid pretty regularly, like for the next 7 or 8 months. So it wasn't an overnight thing like some people. It's like I wanted to learn as much as I could up until the point that I did my shahada. So even then, like I was going pretty often, and Muslims would approach me like, "Hey, when are you gonna do your shahada? When are you gonna do it? Like, you might as well do it now." And I'm like, "Oh, this is my personal like decision. It's like it has to be whenever I feel it, not because somebody else is trying to like basically guilt me in a way. Like, hey, if you died right now, like, what would you do?" I'm like, no, this is like my journey. It's for me to decide when I actually want to switch over because I felt like it was a life changing decision, and I don't want to do it just because someone else wants me to make that. It's like, no, it's my commitment. Like, it has to be something that I removed all the doubts that I've had up until this moment. Like, I've made sure, like, all right, this is what I want to do. So I go to the masjid. I let the sheikh tell me who was actually a good referral. Like, okay, you can talk to this brother. This brother is very knowledgeable. So would learn from them as well, and the Sheikh and everybody. So it was probably, yeah, about 8 months later. It was just me and the Sheikh in the masjid. And I'm like, all right, I feel like I want to do my shahada right now. It's just me and him because I didn't want the whole fanfare because
Mhm.
I'm a little introverted. Well, a lot introverted. So I didn't want to do something like after Juma prayer, after Eid prayer. Like, I'm like, nah, that's too much for me. So I was like, all right, me and the Sheikh, perfect. So after I finished my shahada, I heard some noise and I'm like, I don't really know what that is. And I was like, oh, that's thunder. And I'm like, oh. And then it started pouring rain. Me, being a new Muslim, just did my shahada. I'm like, did I say something wrong? Did I like, I didn't know the significance of rain or anything. I'm like, oh, that's not the reaction I was hoping for. It started hailing and then, I don't know, just as soon as it came, it like stopped. And I was like, all right, I guess it's like a new beginning in a way. So even, I don't know, I felt like that was, a lot of people think like that's the end of like the journey, but really that's just the beginning. Because a lot of times when a Muslim does the Shahada, everyone's like, oh, congratulations. And then they leave them be. But that's in actuality when they need the most support, when they need the most help. So it's a lot of times, especially I see brothers out on the like giving the da'wah in the corner and everything. They're like, hey, salam alaikum. They try to get somebody to do a quick Shahada real quick just to be like, hey, camera. All right, cool. And then they leave that Muslim, and it's like, no, that's when they need the biggest support because a lot of like the growth in Islam is due to like families growing in numbers and everything, not from new
Yes.
converts, because that number is, I think, like studies have said, like 0% growth because just as many new Muslims leave as enter, so it's negating itself. So there's really no growth, and I completely understand that because I've been asked numerous times, like, have you ever thought about going back to your old lifestyle? Have you ever like considered leaving? And I haven't really considered that because I separate Islam from Muslims. It's like I know Islam is perfect. It's like Islam provides the guidance for everything, but the Muslims within the religion are the reason like why people leave because they don't feel like they're part of the community. They feel, especially during Eid and Ramadan and stuff. It's like I feel like it's harder during Christmas time because you feel those past like feelings and stuff, and you're like, I remember this feeling, and this is how like I expected Eid and stuff to be. It's like you feel
Mhm.
that joy and you feel the closeness of family, and and you see that in other people during like Eid, and you're like, that's what like I anticipated. But then you just like, oh, it's like you'll get invites, but they're more like, hey, yeah, like you should come on over, but then they fail to hit you up afterwards. It's like just the polite invites without actually following through. But I don't know. It's like that should be the point where you really support somebody. Like after they do the shahada, there has to be a lot more support, a lot more one-on-one because there's a lot of group activities and such. With someone like me, I don't need a room full of 50 people. Like I'm like, that's all right. It's like one-on-one, just hanging out. You don't even have to like have like a classroom setting. Just an everyday like casual walking around, like exploring, just that community feeling without being like in a lecture hall. Like it makes it seem like Islam is like boom, just only in like a classroom setting at the masjid. When that is such a small part of Islam, is like inside of the masjid. Like 98% of Islam is like just out living in the world, being out there. Just you just want to feel like the community isn't confined to those four walls. You want to feel like
I
it's
love everything you've said so far. It's absolutely amazing. I'm going to question you a little bit further, but that's an amazing introduction. And I feel that, I'm really privileged to have you today, especially you being an introvert. I know we had this conversation before, so I feel quite privileged to have you on the show and being on live TV as well, and also sharing your story, which is actually quite It's very interesting. We have raised these topics before with regards to community support and personal support, and individuals that are Muslims who should be actually expanding in their friendship groups, and even having that sort of like sense of community with individuals and inviting them home, especially like you said, you had that feeling in Christmas. Now that's not there, then you expected for Eid and Ramadan, which is coming up very soon as well. It's another place that you feel that you're not really much supported. That is really important. I want to quickly just ask you again, because I know we spoke about this before. Obviously we're talking about the halal food, and how easy it is to sort of transition. If you can just quickly tell me about that, and then I'll move on to the Sheikh with regards to some of the things that we need to consider to sort of make it better. I mean, was that transition easy for you or not?
I completely honest. It was very easy because I'm vegetarian. I eat fish every so often.
Okay.
So even before Islam, like I didn't have to really worry about that. Like even before Islam, I never smoked, I never drank like any alcohol ever. So that wasn't something I really had to worry about either. So it was honestly it was fairly easy. It was just when I became Muslim, seeing how lax some people are with the halal food. I don't know. From what I hear, it's more lax here than it is in the UK, and I've seen that just personally being in London. It's like it's just totally different. I feel like it was like a culture shock in a way, like seeing like just the differences in the Muslim communities. Like it was halal, 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 and I'm like, I don't know. It's just it was really cool to me. But like then coming back to the States, you have like very few halal stores. I mean, up in Virginia, this area, there is a lot of like halal restaurants, halal grocery stores and such. But I feel like the strictness in abiding by those is a little bit lax. This like in this place, but for
Okay.
me personally,
Absolutely. I get
yeah,
that. I mean, it is really interesting that you are vegetarian, and we even spoke before about how people might say, "Well, you're Muslim now, and you should be eating meat," but the halal meat or things like that. So, Sheikh, what is your opinion on this with regards to eating halal, and if you come from some sort of, your own dietary sort of nutrition, like vegan, vegetarian? Is that something that we actually promote as Muslims, or do we think that it has to be something that we need to be part? Because I have heard this myself before, and also people being quite relaxed or either extreme strict, which is obviously a good thing to be extreme strict when it comes to your intake. So, what is your thoughts, Share?
Naam, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, we send the salutations to Prophet Muhammad and his holy household. It's very nice to hear the story from our brother Robert, and it's these kind of stories which make us to continue to serve the community, because we know there will be nice people like him who will see the light at the end of the tunnel. And I pray and I wish, inshallah, one day we will meet and we will have more discussions together in a gathering of you and me, and maybe just one person, and not in a big gathering, inshallah. Now, regarding the eating halal and looking at the issue of other people with ideas of nutrition, like, for example, vegans, vegetarians, and so on and so forth. Does Islam, according to your question, promote vegan, can I call it lifestyle, or vegetarian lifestyle? The answer is no. And the reason is, if you look at the concept of eating halal and that which is good in the Holy Quran, you can find it in many places. And there's one particular point which is very important. If you look at the Holy Quran and you find, even if it is one ayah, one verse in the Holy Quran, which talk about eating habits, or eating lifestyle, eating halal and that which is halal and tayyib, then you can't come and say, well, I don't like to follow this, I will follow my own way, of thinking. Islam doesn't promote those kind of ideas. However, when we look, for example, let me give you one example in the Holy Quran. In Surah Al-Baqarah, Surah number 2, Ayah 57, you can see clearly there that Allah says, Kulu min tayyibati ma razaqnakum. Kulu, eat, min tayyibati, of the good food, ma razaqnakum, we have provided for you. So when you look at tayyibat, then you come to know that tayyibat as the good food. Here we can find vegetables and meat and everything that which is tayyib. So when we go to the fiqh jurisprudence, according to the way we understand, is that there are primary rulings and secondary rulings. When you look at primary rulings, we are not recommended to say, I'm not going to eat this kind of food, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given all the tayyibat, the good food for us to eat. On the secondary ruling, then, it is where we can say, okay, in some cases, you can be a vegan, for example, or vegetarian, if there are issues to do with the food, but not from primary sources. You can say, well, I'm going to be a vegan, or I'm going to be a vegetarian, I'm not going to eat meat, because that is not being promoted in the Quran or the Sunnah of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And by the way, there is particular hadith which says it's not good, it's like not recommended for you not to eat meat for 40 consecutive days. While the other had, and it says also, it is not recommended for you to eat meat continuously for 40 days. So there's a balance there. And it is this balance when we look at the Sunnah of the Holy Prophet in terms of his actions. He never said that I'm not going to eat meat. Actually, there was a story. One of the companions of the Holy Prophet, he came out and he said, I'm not going to go closer to my wife. I'm not going to eat during the day, I will be fasting, and so on and so forth. So the Holy Prophet, when he had this, he came out of his house and he was like pulling his clothing because of what he had. And he said, what is this I hear from you? Some of you, you say you will not go near to your wife, you want to become too holy, and you are not going to enjoy your food. I am the messenger of Allah. I have married, I have wives, and I do eat nice food in court. What is this which I hear from you? So according to what we understand is that the Holy Prophet did not promote or Aimma of Ahlebait alayhimus salam or major scholars. So we need to look at this subject that way, that Islam allows us to enjoy anything which is food, and that food which is tayyibat. For the secondary rulings, secondary issues, that's another issue. Now,
that is very clear. Thank you so much for explaining that. I've never actually had such a concise explanation. My takeaway from that is that it's not about having one extreme to the other. It's about having the balance, but also allowing yourself to understand that we need to not just, maybe sometimes we are brought up in some sort of like culture or these new nutritional sort of like diets or upbringings that's, you know, around us, and we think it is. I mean, I'm not sure about your story, Robert, with regards to being vegetarian. So how would you sort of like take that information now with your sort of way of being?
I mean, of course, there's like a balance, because a lot of people, if the meal doesn't include meat, then they're like, well, that's not really a meal then. So it's like they have to include it
Yes.
every day meal instead of having that balance. So it's like I do try to include like fish every so often. Just
Okay.
so I try to not overdo one specific thing, because even like if you look at diet, like you can't just focus on one thing, because then you're excluding vitamins from all of these other things. So of course we as
Yes.
humans need like variety instead of just eating the same thing every single day. So it's yeah, it's interesting. But I have a question. Like if you're out eating, like at a restaurant or whatever, like should you worry about any cross contamination between like halal food and non-halal food? Because some restaurants I've seen will use, like, for example, the same pizza cutter on like the vegetarian and the meat pizzas. And I'm like, oh no 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 no. And they're like, what? You don't want me to cut it? I'm like, no no no. I saw you. I try to keep my eye on that. Happens more often than I would like, but that's just what I see. But behind the scenes, I'm pretty sure
Yes.
it happens even more. So, like, how would we navigate those kind of issues? Even if we want to eat like vegetarian while being out, like like, yeah, how would we
I
approach those
understand
type
what
of
you
issues?
mean. That is a very interesting question, and I know that in the UK, obviously, we do have a vast amount of halal restaurants. So I know a lot of people, they choose to only go to halal restaurants, but obviously in a place where you come from, where it is kind of scarce. And people are not that sort of prone to being sort of like, thinking about, oh, we should only eat halal and we're not going to do that. So, Sheikh, this is a very good question. If you are in a position where you do find that you're going to a restaurant where they do have a mixture of halal and non-halal food, but you're going to choose either the vegetarian or fish option, but you're not sure of how their preparations are, or what sort of measures do you take, could you ask them, what do you sort of do in that situation? I mean, I know we can always say, like, just always cook at home or do what we can, but sometimes it's just not possible if you're working and you're out and you're having lunch or something like that. How would you sort of navigate and advise and guide people in that sort of situation?
Yeah, the issue of cross contamination is very important, and I'm glad that Robert has raised this particular point. There are some restaurants, they do understand when you talk to them. For example, you say, "I have issues with meat, for example, or fish. I'm allergic to this," and especially this issue of allergy these days is very
Yeah,
known, and people fear to close their restaurants because of this. So
that's true.
it's good to talk, it's good to ask, it's good to call the manager and explain. I have seen even in America, for example, there are some places when you explain to them, they do understand. So always
Hmm.
it's good to talk. Don't just assume the sign when it says, for example, vegetarians only or halal only, it's halal. Let us be engaging with the management. Another thing which is very important, you have raised, Sister Fahima, is what if I don't know? If
Hmm.
you don't know, you are safe. Because why? You don't know. And until when you know that, for example, there is a contamination here, cross contamination, then of course you are not allowed to eat. And yes, it's easy for someone to say, I will cook at home and I will carry my pack lunch and so on and so forth. But no, let's be realistic. Sometimes we need to go out and we need to be with our families and friends and nice places. So long as there is no contamination between halal and haram, najis and tahir, pure and non-pure, we need to live a simple life, and we can mingle with others in a halal way.
That is so true what you said, Sheikh. I mean, that comes on to my next question, actually, because a lot of the times we feel that we have so much doubt. And when you said that you're safe if you don't know, but then that doubt creeps in. And then that doubt even can go into, I get WhatsApp messages every now and again saying, oh, this particular restaurant or this particular industry or franchise is not, halal anymore, and this, that, and the other. And then it puts doubt in people's mind when they go there again without much proof, and it just kind of spreads in that way. So as you're saying, as long as we like, how do you sort of like get in between that when you think but you're not sure, and then it creates a doubt again, like, do we just take what someone's word is and that's it, basically?
No, not at all. We need to be sure. And imagine if that is what we call just doubt. We spread rumors around the city and we are going to kill someone's business. We will
Hmm.
be
Hmm.
responsible, morally responsible in the eyes of Allah, responsible for the family, which, for example, we have destroyed the business. Always we need to be sure. And it's here, there are two key words they use in terms of fiqh terminology. One is doubt, which is shak, and another one is certainty, which is yaqeen. we always need to act according to yaqeen, certainty. This particular company, they sell products which are not halal. Can I verify it? Yes, I have verified it. The message has come from the management that, yes, for example, this kind of chocolate, we use gelatin, which is haram. Yeah, then we can spread the word. It's my duty. But if I have doubt, I shouldn't spread the message. I am responsible of that message. And if I have doubt myself and I don't spread it, I say, maybe this particular restaurant, they sell something which is doubtful, I should keep it to myself. I shouldn't promote that which is I don't have knowledge about. And that is purely Islam. And we need to make sure we bring this awareness to our sisters and brothers. Anytime when we are in doubt, we should ask. We should engage the management in order for us to be sure of what we are eating. Now,
Definitely. No, thanks you for clarifying that, because it's sometimes people do get confused, and like you said, it can be quite detrimental when the doubt is not actually questioned in the proper way, and then some business can be shut in that way, or or if anything, if you don't raise those doubts, then you yourself is actually committing a sin. When it comes to you, Robert, and say maybe, okay, you can maybe avoid restaurants, you can maybe avoid friends. Now, when it comes to your family and you're sitting at a dinner table, how do you personally navigate with your food? And how do you normally sort of like, do you make them aware, or do you have your own, or do you cook separately, or do you cook for everyone so it's halal? How does that work?
I mean, my family's pretty accepting because even before I became Muslim, they knew that I didn't eat meat, so they just cooked things separate for me. I know a lot of families it isn't the case. Like they'll still like,
Right.
well, it's just like bacon, pork. Like you've eaten this before. Why are you making a big deal? I understand some families it can be more difficult to separate it. I've been blessed in a way that my family has been really accepting of me and my choices. They're like, all right, if it makes you happy, we're gonna support you. And even before like I became Muslim, they were really accepting of like the dietary choices I made. Like, yeah, I don't want to eat any of that, so they'll like either I'll prepare my own or they'll prepare something separate so we can still eat together and everything. So it hasn't been too difficult of a situation for me when I'm with family.
That's nice to
So
hear. No, that's nice to hear, because I do hear some stories, like you mentioned, of other families where it is a bit of a decision where it's quite challenging, and they do have to navigate or even sometimes remove themselves because their families are not that accommodating and accepting as well. So especially when they're younger and they feel that they don't have that guardianship, and they have to sit in the table with their parents or family members that would have pork on the table, so, or alcohol, for example, but they have to obviously sit beside that, or maybe go take their food in the room and cook separately, or whatever it may be. The other thing I wanted to ask you, Sheikh, when it comes to we did discuss this a little bit last week. Our halal, sort of distributors. Do we know much about it, or do we just take also the certificates? Because there's still a lot of news that comes across, which it's not that much, like a lot. It's quite rare to hear it, but we do hear it. Like certain abattoirs are mixing, or they're not saying it properly, and it's not actually in the halal way. And do you think that our Muslim, especially in our sort of sect and our sort of community, are we actually involved in these sorts of places of, industries where we can actually also have some sort of like say in it, or monitor it, or, have like, our distributors where we can go to, so that it's a safe space? It's really important, because we don't actually have, anyone that I know personally, and I know quite a lot of people now, especially doing these shows and meeting so many different types of professionals, to say that, oh, we know of this place where they do actually cut and raise the the animals in a particular way, and they cut and slaughtered in a halal way, and they distribute it nicely, and there's no mixing, and there's nothing wrong. But we do hear of these stories where actually people have been caught out, so, or the animals have not been kept nicely. Like, how do we sort of get ourselves into a position where we can be more at the forefront, because our intake is so important, and now they're coming up with so many different, like like, which is not just organic stuff, but which is really expensive. But even halal meats become really expensive. Halal food generally, the stores are becoming really expensive. I mean, is it justified because it's so rare? And shouldn't we have more so that maybe it's easily available, at the same time we're in control, and also our prices will be cut for it?
Yeah, halal business is a big business. So whichever way we are looking at that word business, it's a big business, and it's becoming bigger and bigger day by day. Here, in the country which we are living in, there are regulations, and government bodies are very active because there is a law. Once you put a certificate and you say this is halal, the definition of it according to Islam, it has to be slaughtered. The animal has to be slaughtered by a Muslim. The animal has to be faced towards Qibla. You have to mention the name of Allah when you slaughter, and you have to slaughter the animal before it dies. So now we have the issue of stunning. Can we stun the animal or not? Countries where we are, they say you can't just slaughter without stunning. When you stun, is the animal dead or not? If still there are movements there and you slaughter, that is halal if they follow all the conditions. We have here scholars. Two things I want to mention, which is very important. How can we look at the distributors and monitoring? We have two organizations or two bodies. One is this body of the scholars. And mashallah, for example, in UK, we have many scholars who are very active on this particular field. If you talk, you ask them about this particular subject, they know. And another
Okay.
thing is organizations. We have many Islamic organizations. For example, the umbrella body of Muslims in UK. If you ask them, they know. They will give you all the information. And so, in terms of certificates from the main companies, those certificates are good. However, we know with any group of people, sometimes you may find those ones who want to cut shorts or to take shortcuts in order for them to make money. Those will cause us trouble. They may take, for example, meat from someone who is not a Muslim, and they come and sell it at the Muslim market. If I have doubt, I need to find out. I need to ask. So, what I can say here is we need to engage our scholars. We need to engage the Islamic bodies because they are there for us. But generally speaking, we are safe because of the rules and regulations which are there. And there are people actually who have been caught and they were selling meat which was not halal, and the government
Yeah.
either took away their certificate or fined them heavily. Yeah.
Very true, very true. That's really nice and reassuring that we do have a law in the UK. I know it's probably similar to the US, but like you mentioned, there are individuals that are not as strict, and you found that the UK individuals are more strict on eating halal. That's why we do have much more restaurants and butchers and places that we can actually buy from, because people are actually more observant, and they do actually want to make that, and take it forward for the wider community. So what would be your sort of, I know because you're an individual that actually takes it upon themselves, it's quite inspiring to hear you speak actually, Robert, because you quite lovely said even at the beginning that you come to Islam not for the Muslims. Not to say that there aren't really good representatives, but I have heard personally, unfortunately, that people have moved away because they've actually witnessed some of the some of the actual representations that Muslims don't actually abide by, and it's been quite detrimental, where they've actually left the religion. So we might take it lightly and say that yes, we need to follow our religion and not just the people, but when you come into Islam, a big part of that is community, a big part of that is family, it's friendship, it's actually coming into a place where you want to find that new family that you've probably even left behind or not as close or familiar with. Now, what would you like to see happen that is more? Because it's voices like you who are actually going through it, so that only, we can only learn from, and we can, try and apply this and give better solutions and bring it to being. Maybe we might see Sheikh Rashid there in the US, giving his talks and, bringing these communities together, I'm sure, once this, pandemic is over for traveling. But what would you like to see? Because this is, your episode today for you to highlight, because you can give the tips and you can give the solutions, because you know really what's missing in your entire, in your life, for it to be better and easier, and for existing Muslims especially to realize this and hopefully bring it into fruition.
Yeah, because like even after I became Muslim, like I would still talk to my non-Muslim friends and everything, and it was like months after, and then some of them found out I was Muslim, and then all of a sudden, like I changed in their eyes. Like even though they didn't know, months afterwards, like soon as they found out, like their opinion of me just instantly changed. Like, and then I had some friends, because of course coming from a small town, like I had some people who didn't. I was the only one that knew, so therefore I was representative of every Muslim in the world to them. So I would have to justify things like, "Yo, no, that's more cultural, yada yada." But the thing was, like, no matter what I said, no matter what facts I presented them, I was never gonna change their mind. Like some people, they're never gonna change their view of Muslims. Like the only one that can change their view and their opinion is Allah. So it's like us as Muslims, we can't feel like we can give them like a library of facts. They're still gonna have their opinion. They're gonna settle down with that. So back to your question though, it's like just I guess just that support, just inviting them out. Like if you're going out for coffee or something, like, hey, yeah, are you free this weekend? Just small side of the masjid, because it's like people want to feel like you're making an effort to like involve them, not
Yeah.
like, hey, yeah, I'm masjid, you can join me there. I mean, that's cool too, don't get me wrong, but it's like we want to feel like the relationship isn't just confined to the masjid. Like if you're going out to the movies, like include us in your group of friends. Like we're no different. It's like we want to feel included, even if like we're the only white in the group. It's like I don't care. Like even growing up, like I was the only white dude in my group of friends. Like I don't care being the only person there. Like I don't have to be in a group full of like other reverts or converts. Like I'm cool just being the only one. It's like they feel like they have to keep us as a community. Like, oh yeah, it's a group of like converts. It's like no, it's like you don't have to differentiate me. Like just cool, just invite me. I don't mind. Like I just want to like we're all Muslim. Like we shouldn't divide it by like backgrounds or anything like this. It's like we're all trying to get to the same point together, trying to progress and become better Muslims together. It's like we have to like learn from each other. If you learn from the same people you've always grown with, then you're really not growing. It's like you're just all moving in the same direction. You need people outside of your immediate group of friends in order to grow, to learn about their background. It's like people here, it's like they grow up with the same people who've lived here their whole life. It's like there's different experiences. Like I come from a small little town. Like there's so much to learn on both of our ends, because like I know like type of people like that are like really really heavily against Islam. Like I've grown up around these type of people. And it's like for me to come out on the other end, it's like I don't know. It's kind of fascinating in a way when you think about it. It's like how
Just
did I
out of
not end up?
interest,
Yeah,
just out of interest, Robert, when you say that people do have a negative viewpoint of Islam, do you think that's through media, through other Muslims? What is your take on that? Why is that so much so? I'm really trying to understand that.
it's like media, and they follow their specific group and people that have the same opinion as they do, and they're just
Okay.
like set in their ways. Like they can talk to me, like I'm playing it the best I can, but then they're always gonna have something contradicted, even if it's like false, and like you provide that false. They're like, nah, whatever. My opinion, and that's all that matters. It's like they just want to argue about it instead of having a
Mm-hmm,
actual conversation.
mm-hmm.
Like I've been involved in countless. I generally ignore it, but people will be like, "Why don't you answer? Why don't you answer?" And I'm like, "All right, I'm gonna answer, and you're gonna see exactly why I deny." And they're like, all right, I see that they just want to pick a fight and just argue about the matter. So I have a question,
Yeah, no, I
Sheikh.
hear you. I hear you. It is quite something that it's challenging when you're having to always try to defend yourself as to what your beliefs are and where you come from. Sheikh, I mean, what I'm hearing from Robert here, it's about just having inclusion and integration. And that is, you know, we have a problem in our Muslim communities, and I have raised this plenty times, and I will raise it again and again. So hopefully it sinks in that we do need to have a wider friendship group and circles. I know for a fact that, you know, I can sit anywhere with any background, any age, and, you know, I'm one of the very few people that would mix and mingle like that. But everyone else that I speak to, they're like, oh, well, I've never met a revert, or I've never done that, because you've not made the effort, because you do stick to your own. You only go to certain places and you're not that inviting. I'm sorry, but we have to take accountability for why we are the way we are. Because when we want to make an effort with our friendship groups, when we want to make an effort, we obviously go the extra mile. We want to go and search for that Iraqi or that Pakistani or that Iranian group or that mosque or that center. Or once we know that they speak the same language, that's who we will stick to. And the thing is, like Robert said, and I've always said this, I love having this platform because it's not about, you know, bringing all, you know, Muslims together in a particular, you know, Iraqi or, you know, Pakistani or Iranian, you know, revert, Muslim, you know, convert, you know, from whatever background. We're sitting together here and we're quite, you know, sitting together integrated, and that's what it's about, not looking beyond that. As much as our cultures are part of our identity, but it's actually now, you know, from more and more conversations like this, it's actually holding us back when we're only sticking to that, when we're only keeping ourselves in these groups. And it's really such a shame, because Islam really is not about that. It is about, you know, spreading it widely. And we're just so fearful. And I can understand the previous generation, you know, coming here as immigrants and feeling that way and thinking that they're losing their identity. But they've been here now for at least 30, 40 years, knowing that they can integrate their own backgrounds here, be British, be Muslim, be, you know, Pakistani, Iranian, whatever it may be, same like in the US, and, you know, have a sort of, you know, a rainbow of colors when it comes to your identity. Now, what more would you advise the community in order for them to not just become cultural centers amongst their families and friends and mosques, but actually hear these voices like Robert, you know, like he is sitting here and unfortunately hasn't, you know, been deterred by the unfortunate representation of Muslims, which is really sad actually, that we actually have to sit here saying that. As much as they are good, we should be not having any of those representations, which actually deter Muslims from even entering and then leaving, because that is our responsibility. So, how do you feel that we can move forward with this in order for us to actually become, you know, not just people of color, race, background, but people of humanity, people of, you know, understanding, and especially if someone's coming in as a Muslim, we are really going to take them on like our responsibility, like our family and our close friend. How would you try and move this forward?
Mm. First of all, I really admire the journey which Robert took, and I congratulate him for that, and I encourage him to continue to stand for Islam, not to stand for people who claim to be Muslims. What I mean here is that try to know Islam from the sources and practice that according to the real Islam. The real Islam wants us to be the ummah, and that's the key word, ummah, community. We have our own families, yeah, immediate families, nucleus family, but then we have the bigger family, or the biggest family of ummah. When you look at the time of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you see him, you see Ali bin Abi Talib, you see others who are Quraysh. Then you see someone, for example, Miqdad, who was known Miqdad ibn al-Aswad, Miqdad, son of the black man. Can you imagine, yeah, in the history? Then you have Salman al-Farisi, Salman the Persian. You have Suhaib al-Rumi, Suhaib the Roman. This is the ummah of Islam. Inna hadhihi ummatukum ummatan wahida wa ana rabbukum fa'budun. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, that this ummah of yours is one, and I am your Lord, so worship me. It is here we need to bring the concept of ummah from our heads, from wherever it is, make it practical, let it be seen. As Sister Fahima, you say, it's true. Unfortunately, we have this issue. Unfortunately, still we have our local centers, local jamaats, local masjid, and we like to be connected with that one to be known. We are people from this particular group. This is wrong. We need to bring the concept of Ummah, put it into practice in order for us to be seen together. And anyone who wants to practice the same issues of unfortunately to say that there are those people who have this kind of thinking. I will be safe if I am with the people I share the culture. Come on, we have the culture of Islam, and that is the culture which we all want to adhere into. We all claim that Imam, the 12th Imam, when he reappears, he will bring all the Ummah together, and it's true. There will be 313, the leaders who will be with him. They will be from all over the world. We want to be part and parcel of that particular movement, that particular setup. And it is here we need to challenge these ideas that no, we want to set our own community. What about the others? Who will take care of them?
Exactly.
What are you going to say to your Lord when you meet with the angels? Oh, I segregated because why? I thought it was easy for me to act according to my culture, my ethnicity. That's totally wrong. And it is here we need to encourage Brother Robert to continue to search for the right mindset, people who have the right mindset. And these are your brothers, these are your sisters. Do not allow anyone who may come to you and say, oh, you know what, you are not a born Muslim because why? Your culture is totally different. Say, my culture is Islam. Salman al-Farisi, Salman al-Farisi, yeah, at the time of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there were some companions who wanted to say, Salman, I am son of so, I come from this clan and this tribe. Who is your father? Who are you, son of who? Salman said the beautiful answer. The beautiful answer by saying, Ana ibnul Islam. I am the son of Islam. And this is fantastic. And this, I think, if you take it, Robert, to anyone and you say, I am the son of that Islam, Islam is my family, and I adhere to that, that will be fantastic. And I know Robert wanted to ask a question. We don't want him to forget that question, Sister Fahima, if you don't mind.
Of course, please go
Yeah.
ahead before the end of the show.
Okay, really quick. Okay, with the halal meat and food in general, how should we take like the human toll in all of this? Like the people working in the factories, the people in the fields and everything. Like how does that play into like the larger scale of the halal industry or food industry in general?
Yeah. So
Sheikh.
in terms of touching, for example, if someone who, let's say, he has contaminated his hands with something which we call najis, and then he touches a meat which is halal, has been slaughtered in a halal way. The only thing you need to do is just wash it. Wash it normally, and then you can prepare it and eat it. Sometimes we go to places where those people who serve the food are not Muslims. If they touch the food and if they have contaminated their hands and then they touch the food, you cannot eat that. But if that they just serve you and there's no any contamination, no problem at all. You can enjoy your halal food.
Was there anything else you'd like to add before the end, Robert?
Mm, let me think. What about the mistreatment? Because I know like in the fields and stuff, they use people and they don't pay them as much. And the conditions of like the human aspect, it's like really low. Like you see articles about it, you read it. It's not just in like the slaughterhouses or anything, but even the fields. Like people are out there in horrendous conditions. Like what should we do about those type of aspects? I guess. Like is there anything we can do aside from like trying to push and persuade the companies in charge to like make changes or
Mm.
Sheikh, did you hear that?
Yeah, sure. I think ill treatment to judge or to act in a way of not practicing justice among the employees, that is totally haram. It's not allowed. Unfortunately, you may find some people who have Islamic names and they show that ill treatment to their employees, that is not allowed totally. It is haram, and we have to speak against those people. And I know, for example, when the month of Muharram comes, there are many speakers, when they speak, scholars, they talk to people, they say exactly, why are you fighting and cry for Imam Hussein while you treat your people, your employees, like the way Yazid used to treat people? So there is that kind of awareness, and we need to speak, and we need to bring the awareness that it is haram, it's not allowed. Concept of halal is not by eating food only. Halal is your wage which you are making. If you are mistreating people and you commit injustice, and then you sit on your table and you eat what called halal, you have eaten a lot of haram. It's just this food. We need to live a life which is halal life in order for us to be better people, inshallah.
Wow, I think I could not have ended it better myself. That was an absolute amazing point, Sheikh, that you brought at the end, and that is so true. Thank you so much, Sheikh, for your time. Thank you so much, Robert, as well. It's been an absolute pleasure. I really, really, hope that we continue to collaborate and connect. Inshallah, when you're here in the UK, we will all sit together and we will, integrate properly, and we'll go to all the centers. I think I had an idea now talking on the show. We're going to go with a herd of all types of people to all these cultural centers, and let's see how actually we are received. And inshallah, we can only bring more collaboration, because I know I'm not the one to let them take over. We're going to take over. We're going to make it happen. Inshallah, we have to take that stand. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. Inshallah, we will see you all soon. Take care. It was an amazing show tonight. I hope you enjoyed it like how I did, and we will be back next